Hello viewers, welcome to Newsweek South Asia, a program that talks about breeding of terrorism and its impact on South Asian nations. Let's begin with the headlines first. Indian security forces eliminate 3 LAT terrorists in encounter. United States, Blinken says Taliban attacks in Afghanistan are deeply troubling. And situation in Afghanistan continues to deteriorate amid Taliban offensive. Last year, Kashmir Valley witnessed widespread anti-terror operations that resulted in the killing of the highest number of terrorists. The same success story of Indian security forces is being repeated this year as terrorists in the valley are suffering huge losses with the killing of their commanders. The recent spurt in the encounters and arrest of terrorists in Jammu and Kashmir is taking the counter-insurgency operations to the next level. We'll take a look.
Hours of relentless exchange of bullets killed 3 terrorists of a Pakistan-based terror outfit, Lashkar-e-Taiba, in Bandepora region of Jammu and Kashmir. In a similar incident, 1 more terrorist was killed in Kulgam region of the Union Territory. A joint team of security forces launched a cordon and search operation after receiving specific inputs about the presence of terrorists in the areas. In the past couple of months, several terrorists have been eliminated by Indian security forces in Kashmir. With such successful operations, one after another, the entire ecosystem of terrorists across the valley has come to a standstill.
परसों कुलगाम पुलिस को एक तला मिली थी कि शोक बाबा फॉरेस्ट जो है बांडीपुर में उसमें 3-4 मिलिटेंट आए हुए हैं और खास करके साकिर अल्ताफ बाबा जो 2018 में बाघा बॉर्डर से पाकिस्तान गया था, वो भी उस ग्रुप के साथ आया है। ये सारे एलईटी का ग्रुप है। तो बांडीपुर पुलिस और आर्मी मिलके कॉर्डन डाला, सर्च करते ही फायरिंग शुरू हो गया, जिसमें हमारे एक जवान आर्मी के जख्मी हो गए। बाद में उसको एयरलिफ्ट करके सीने लाया गया, उसका हालत अभी बिल्कुल ठीक है। और 3 टेररिस्ट मारे गए, जिसमें एक साकिर अल्ताफ बाबा है, लोकल टेररिस्ट एलईटी का, 2 एफटी है। अभी सर्च ऑपरेशन चल रहा है। हम लोग इतला है कि 1 से 2 टेररिस्ट और हो सकता है।
In the beginning of this year, India and Pakistan agreed to reduce tensions and maintain a ceasefire along the border in Kashmir. The peace within the valley could, however, sustain for just a couple of months as Pakistan resumed terror activities and infiltration attempts along the border. According to sources, 4 infiltration attempts were made by Pakistan in the last week, during which as many as 20 terrorists are learned to have entered Kashmir. There has been an increase in the participation of foreign terrorists in attacks on security forces. According to intelligence reports, there are over 200 terrorists active in the valley, with 40% of them having infiltrated from Pakistan. However, India is effectively thwarting all its devious agendas. As per the data by Indian government sources, till July 2021, the security forces were engaged in 40 operations, and of the 95 terrorists killed, 89 were killed in Kashmir and 6 in Jammu. Total 10 foreign terrorists were also killed during this period.
After temporary reduction in terrorist cases on LOC and holding of ceasefire, there has been a very significant spike in Pakistan-backed terrorist activities in J&K. I said that Pakistan's obsession with J&K can never end. Pakistan's desire to merge Jammu and Kashmir with Pakistan can never end. So therefore, what is the answer? The answer is we have to remain highly alert. We have to be in proactive mode. We have to be in aggressive mode. We have to keep destroying the launch pads which Pakistan keeps building near LOC. We have to put Pakistan on back foot.
Pakistan-backed Lashkar-e-Taiba has of late stepped up operations in Jammu and Kashmir. Among the total terrorists killed this year, half were from LAT. They have targeted several innocent civilians and security officials without any protection in Kashmir. They are desperately trying to create an atmosphere of fear and terror among people. that would hinder the economy and progress in the valley.
Lashkar-e-Taiba is unleashing terror in Jammu and Kashmir. The principal reason which I feel is that Pakistan wants to remain in news with regard to J&K issue. By creating terror in Jammu and Kashmir, it wants to show to the world that Jammu and Kashmir is a disputed area. There is a problem in Jammu and Kashmir. They are snakes. If they are left, they will try to escape. And again, innocent people will become victim of this terrorists. So the strategy should be locate, shoot and kill. The Indian Army has to destroy the sympathizers and cadre of Lashkar-e-Taiba who are operating from the soil of Jammu and Kashmir.
Meanwhile, terror recruitment in the valley has seen a reduction in respect to last year. In terms of recruitment till July 15 this year, 69 individuals joined the terror ranks compared with 85 in the corresponding period last year. Much of the recruitment has been from the 3 South Kashmir districts, Kulgam, Shopian and Pulwama. Overall, in 2020, 174 individuals turned militants compared with 143 in 2019. Pakistan's intelligence agency and terror groups are now invading cyberspace for recruitment in Jammu and Kashmir, as direct physical interactions have become difficult due to the security forces' hawk-eyed vigil. As per security forces, technological interventions have helped curb recruitment in the valley, besides intensification on counter-terrorism operations.
Let's now move to Afghanistan, which faces a confluence of multiple crises just as President Biden withdraws American forces. Beyond the pandemic, drought and a dire economy, the country confronts a resurgent Taliban movement that now controls or contests more of the country's territory than at any time since 2001. Recently, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited India and raised concerns over the Taliban's intentions and Afghanistan's future.
This recently emerged video is showing people protesting and raising their voice against the atrocities of Taliban and Pakistan, which has been taking advantage of current chaos and is openly supporting Taliban to gain stronghold against Afghan government. This is Afghanistan's diaspora living in California, which recently took to the streets to protest against Taliban's carnage. Afghanistan is on course to witness the highest number of documented civilian casualties in a single year since the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan records began. Recently, on a 2-day visit to India, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken expressed concerns over the motives of Taliban and increasing attacks on civilians in Afghanistan. Blinken referred to atrocities committed by the Taliban in areas the group had taken over and said an Afghanistan that didn't respect the rights of its people would become a pariah state.
Yes, certainly what we're seeing on the ground in the last week is the Taliban making advances on district centers, challenging some provincial capitals. We've also seen these reports of atrocities committed by the Taliban in areas that it's taken over that are deeply troubling, and certainly do not speak well to the Taliban's intentions for the country as a whole.
Afghanistan is battling every day to survive, and the Taliban is beating the drum of victory. It seems to have rolled up its sleeves to reimpose its regime. However, Washington has made it clear that taking Afghanistan by force won't grant Taliban international recognition.
The Taliban says that it seeks international recognition, that it wants international support for Afghanistan. Presumably it wants its leaders to be able to travel freely in the world, sanctions lifted, etc. Well, the taking over the country by force And abusing the rights of its people is not the path to achieve those objectives. There's only one path, and that's at the negotiating table to resolve the conflict peacefully and to have an Afghanistan emerge that is governed in a genuinely inclusive way and that's representative of all its people.
The overall trend is clearly unfavorable to the Afghan government, which could face an existential crisis if it is not addressed and reversed. The Taliban, beyond having momentum, appear to have definitive psychological edge. They want to return to power, and the support of Afghanistan remains an enormous asset in their favor. Recently, a report prepared by UN Analytical Support and Sanctions Monitoring Team also said that the terrorists belonging to Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan support the Taliban insurgents inside Afghanistan against Afghan forces. India thus has clarified that the independence and sovereignty of Afghanistan can only be ensured if it is free from malign influences.
We don't think outcomes should be decided by force on the battlefield. We think the peace negotiations should be a negotiation and should lead to peace. It should see cessation of violence. There should be a political settlement. So that is where we are looking at, and I think there is a broad consensus, deep consensus. Most of the neighbors of Afghanistan agree with that. Now, I grant you, not everybody who agrees does what they say they would do. I noted the exception which you have pointed out to. But I think that is a reality which is not new. That is the reality over the last 20 years.
A negotiated peace in Afghanistan presents a number of challenges. If there is no peace in Afghanistan, there will be a major threat in the region and beyond, as Afghanistan is the first line of defense against terrorism not only for itself but for the entire world.
Moving on, the Taliban are advancing relentlessly across Afghanistan. Several districts have fallen victim to Taliban's terror, while at one site they are continuously targeting Afghan security forces on a daily basis. Artists too are bearing the brunt. Recently, popular Afghan comedian and entertainer Nazar Mohammad was murdered in Kandahar province by the Taliban, a report.
A popular comedian was among several people killed by Taliban forces in Afghanistan, where tens of thousands of refugees are fleeing the advancing Taliban terrorists. Nazar Mohammad, Afghanistan's popular comedian, was dragged from his home and killed by the Taliban. This video is from moments before his killing that showed Nazar Mohammad, better known as Khasa Zwan, being slapped and harassed at gunpoint just moments ahead of his killing. Photos also emerged on social media showing Khasa tied to a tree before his execution and then on the ground with his throat slit. His killing has raised fears among the Afghan artists and entertainers, as Taliban have always been intolerant of art and humor. It outlawed dozens of seemingly innocuous activities and pastimes in Afghanistan during its 1996-2001 rules, including kite flying, TV soap operas, and even playing music.
The way they have killed this comedian and the video that is viral shows that Taliban has not changed. They are going to stick to the same Sharia laws that they did when in the earlier stint in the 90s. People who say that this Taliban is changed from that Taliban, there is nothing changed. They are going to remain the same, and it is going to be a tragedy for the artists over there, whether they are performing artists, whether they are art and crafts, or whether even they are movie theatre artists, or the women and children over there.
This comes as the Taliban intensified attack against the Afghan security forces and claimed to have captured nearly 70% of Afghanistan. In just the past 2 weeks, at least 33 people, including religious scholars, tribal elders, and journalists, have been murdered by the Taliban in Kandahar, considered the birthplace of the radical Islamist group. Tolo News, an Afghan news organization, reported last week that over 100 civilians were killed by unidentified gunmen in the Spin Boldak district of Kandahar. A UN report has revealed that the number of civilian casualties in Afghanistan reached a record high in the first half of 2021 as the conflicts continue to escalate amid US and NATO troops withdrawal.
Taliban has been getting a run over the country as soon as America started withdrawing its troops. Shows that there is no resistance from the Afghanistan army, and whatever resistance is there now, they are trying to protect the cities over there that are in Afghanistan. And now, after the support of Americans, they have assured the government over there in Afghanistan that they would resume the aerial bombing of Taliban and also arms supply to the government over there. This sort of a thing will carry on the fight between the Afghanistan army and the Taliban, and this would become another flashpoint like Syria, wherein the civil war would be there and the people would suffer.
As Afghanistan battles chaos and uncertainty, China, that recently hosted a 9-member Taliban delegation headed by Afghan Taliban Political Committee Chief Mullah Abdul Ghani Biradar in Tianjin, seems to be working on its big plan. It is attempting to establish friendly ties with the Taliban. China is trying to secure its interest in the post-US Afghanistan, and this active engagement is covered under the name of Belt and Road Initiative. Beijing has invested heavily in its Belt and Road Trade and Infrastructure Scheme, and China's Foreign Ministry has previously discussed the possibility of extending the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor into Afghanistan. China is also concerned that under Taliban rule, Afghanistan will become a hub for the East Turkestan Islamic Movement, a separatist outfit aligned to Al-Qaeda, which is waging an insurgency in Xinjiang. Now this meeting comes at a time when the insurgent group has been craving for legitimacy. The Taliban is constantly reaching out to the countries from the region in the expectation of becoming a major player in controlling Afghanistan.
Moving on, horrific acts of terrorism such as the November 2008 attacks in Mumbai underscore the regional nature of the terrorist threat in South Asia, and they highlight the need for greater cooperation within the region to address it. Terrorism is a multifaceted reality which calls for international community to forge stronger engagement on a policy for counter-terrorism. In South Asia, the terrorism flourishes from the lands of Pakistan and Afghanistan and is a cause of worry for regional security. Let's take a look.
The events of September 11, 2001 brought terrorism to the forefront of the international community's security agenda. However, while this has highlighted the threat posed by jihadist terrorism, South Asia has been a victim of violence perpetrated by myriad of groups with diverse objectives and varied ideologies. Experts point to the role of the United Nations and its role in promoting counter-terrorism cooperation and capacity-building activities in the region in the framework of the UN strategy. It is believed that the UN, under the direction of the Counter-Terrorism Implementation Task Force, should develop a strategy for such engagement as part of an effort to link the global body more closely to South Asian counter-terrorism needs and priorities. The President-elect of United Nations General Assembly said, "Terrorism is a scourge and will be dealt jointly."
Terrorism is a scourge that has been in this region, in many parts of the world, and which has taken the lives of so many civilians. It does not know any religion, no borders, no humanity. It's an evil, and we need to address it comprehensively. The United Nations has been slow in coming up with the definition. I hope that the definition would be reached soon.
In South Asia, The terrorism perpetrators from Pakistan and its border with Afghanistan that poses a threat to regional and global security. Pakistan-based terror groups, be it Al-Qaeda, Haqqani Network or the Taliban, are enjoying state sponsorship to create mayhem in Afghanistan and parts of India. Despite remaining on the grey list of the Financial Action Task Force, the global money laundering and terrorist financing watchdog, Pakistan is using terror outfits for its proxy war against its neighbours. When asked about state sponsorship and support of terrorism by Pakistan, Saeed said that the United Nations deals with terrorism issues in the 6th Committee. The convention that has been mandated to come out of the 6th Committee continues to be negotiated.
United Nations deals with terrorism issues in the 6th Committee. The convention that has been mandated to come out of the 6th Committee is continues to be negotiated. So I'm hoping that the 76th session we'll see some progress. Yes, you're right, we support the membership of India in the Security Council as a permanent member. As the President of the General Assembly, it will be my role to bring countries together and try to form a broader consensus on the Security Council reform process.
India continues to raise the issue of Pakistan-sponsored terrorism at the United Nations. Indian Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla, while addressing the UN Security Council briefing, recently said that terrorism compounds the twin problems of violence against humanitarian personnel and lack of accountability, and sanctioning those responsible for violating humanitarian law should have wider regional and international support. India chairs the Taliban Sanctions Committee and Counter-Terrorism Committee and continue to raise voice against terrorism for maintaining peace and development in the region and rest of the world.
And with that, we come to the end of this episode of Newsweek South Asia. We'll be back next week with more news, views and analysis from the subcontinent. Meanwhile, do keep writing to us at nwsa@nin.com. This is Karim Zamek signing off on behalf of the entire production team of Newsweek South Asia. Goodbye and take care.